Hello, everyone. Uh-oh, hold on. Make sure everybody can hear me. I want to make sure everybody can hear me properly. Everybody can hear all right? Everything? Yeah, I want to make sure we're not getting echo outside of that. Just making sure. No echo, loud and clear? Great. Perfect. I'm going to actually bring you down a little bit because I think you're a little hot. There we go. Welcome, everyone. This is the Cooldown. I am your co-host, co-DM, Ron Ogden, and with me as always. Hey, guys. Welcome. It's Monday. Lots of... Jared was out of the country this weekend. So, no Jared. They're saying no Jared. What about now? Can you hear Jared? Jared, talk. You can hear you. I don't know why that's happening. Hold on. No, Jared. You're what? I don't get it. Yeah, I see the sound happening in the OBS. Let me try this. Let's see if this is any better.
Some people are saying he's very, very faint. So maybe just bring me up a bunch. Oh, I can hear myself now.
You can hear yourself okay now? Am I doubled?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. They can hear me now. Okay, we're good.
Perfect. Apologies.
I made such a great joke too, and
I know,
they didn't even hear it.
I know. So Jared was out of the country, as you heard me say.
Yes.
He went to Mexico.
Mexico City, Mexico.
Oh, Mexico City, Mexico.
Yeah, deep in Mexico. Well, I mean, middle of Mexico, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah,
middle of Mexico.
It was fun. Oh, by the way, if you like seafood, and I am well aware that Mexico City is not near the coast. I am well aware. I went out for seafood in Mexico City, and it was the best, and I don't say this lightly, the best grilled octopus I have ever had. And I've eaten a lot of octopus. I've had octopus in Japan. I've had octopus all over the States. I've had octopus in Barcelona. The best grilled octopus I've ever had in my entire life, Mexico City.
Wow, that's saying something. Well, before we get into today's, I called it an Arcane Artistry cooldown.
Okay, cool.
That's what we're kind of doing today.
Yeah.
But before we do that, we want to thank everyone for being here, donating your time to us, as well as all of our patrons. Without you and your support, this show would not exist, and all of our shows would not exist. So thank you very much. And in that vein, please check out, if you are a patron, please check out your patrons. There are some rewards that have been going out, so make sure you check those. I just dropped the Osaka last week.
I feel like people missed that. Everybody was asking for the race information, and
this is how it works, man. They ask you for it, and then it does. You give it to them, and then nothing happens. So
the Osaka race that Ron created from scratch, which is really well balanced too. So you can use it in your own game. It's not OP at all. He's got that on Patreon, so you can download it and you can use it in your own game. And it's really 3 races because it's the Osaka base race, and then the 3 subspecies underneath it. So if you want bear folk in your game, booyah, you got it.
The Ursid.
By the way, Morgan just dropped a cast secret as well. So if you're at that tier on Patreon, check that out as well.
Very cool.
That's going to be his character for the new season. Yeah.
Make sure to go check out that cast secret as soon as you can. I am also dropping the Rabhidi later this week, so keep a lookout for that. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. So what are we doing today, Jared? I hear we're making a monster. Is that true?
Yes. So today's cooldown is more world building, and not at the top of the show because we have questions that we need to answer first, and I have a bunch of stuff that I want to talk about as far as homebrewing your own monsters go. But towards the end of the show, we're going to build a monster with chat's help. No players are allowed to watch that part. Where hopefully, if it's not overly powerful, because there only starting at 3rd level, we can use it against them. Although, if we want a TPK season 2, I suppose we could
what have I said? What have I said,
you know,
Jared? Death is just the beginning of the next greatest adventure. So
there you go. The whole season will just get turned into them trying to come back
get
from
out of
whatever
Hades
afterworld.
Yeah, exactly. Get out of the underworld. Yep.
Yeah. Love it.
So I've got the Discord questions. Do you have the Patreon questions?
Yeah, let's do Patreon first.
Of course.
Okay, so CJ...
Also a quick shout out. I want to do a couple quick shout outs.
Please.
Just Jules subscribing for 15 months.
Woo!
Thank you, Just Jules. That's amazing. Tuo Mask also subscribing now for 15 months. Incredible, guys. Thank you so much. We've got a hype train going. Thank you.
Yeah, don't forget you can use your Amazon Prime account to subscribe for free.
Look,
Jessica always mentions that.
Yep, and look below and how to do that. If you just look below, there's some panels there that'll tell you exactly how to make that happen.
Yeah.
All right, pal.
Okay, let's do this. Cjo225, any suggestions on how to create essentially a pagan god, BBEG, that has been awakened by an evil cult to take revenge on the industrialization in a steampunk world I'm coming up with? Wow, that's the most specific question we've ever had. I was thinking a necromancer druid type thing, but I've never done anything like that before. I'm using the song, The Yawning Grave by Lord Huron as inspiration. I don't know who that is.
Right.
I love complicated villains, the ones that you agree with their points, but not their methods. Any ideas would be greatly appreciated. You guys are the best. Thank you, Cjo.
Well, Cjo, I think you've already started making a really good decision, specifically around that last part where you're like, you agree but disagree on how they go about what they're trying to solve. With mixing druid and necromancer, I think that's a strong. It introduces some other things that you have to figure out, some pitfalls that might how that might work or work around, but. Giving a druid the abilities of a necromancer and saying, well, I just bring you back the dead because the dead are natural too, and I'm just using their bodies to do my bidding. That's a slippery slope. And I think that's a pretty good BBEG just on its own right there. So you got a good start.
Interesting enough, Circle of Spores has some pseudo necromantic like powers at higher levels. This actually gets into a tip that I wanted to say later in the show, but I'll do it now since we're already talking about it. One of the pitfalls that a lot of dungeon masters make, I even made it when 5th edition first came out, is they will make monsters or NPCs that the player characters interact with and possibly fight that are literally just player characters that they've created and they're using them as an NPC. Now, why is this a mistake? You don't need all of the information that's on a player character sheet to have an NPC that is a person. It's just going to clog everything up and make it harder for you to figure out what that person's number one go-to attack, defense, hit points, armor class, all of the basic stat block stuff that you need when you're using a person as a monster. And the term monster, I just think of whoever they're fighting. That's all the monster
The stat block.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of that is because D&D is not meant to be a PvP rule system, right? It's not like let's put player characters against each other. Might be an interesting experiment to run someday, but not sure it's really balanced for that.
Yeah, so what I would recommend is look at what abilities and powers and spells and what have you that you really want that monster, in this case, an evil druid, to have. And that's all you take. That's all you keep. You don't need their entire list of skills. You might want their perception, and if they're skilled at, deception or something like that.
Survival for monsters, usually.
1 or 2 main skills. But like a monster stat block, that's all you really need. Their main abilities, if you want to give them a bonus action, if you want to give them a passive, if you want to give them a reaction, the main things that they can do. What's more important, in my opinion, with that particular type of monster is, what is that character's backstory? How does it fit into the plot of your show or your story or your home game? And what does that monster, aka evil druid, really want? What's its motivation? Because that's going to help you decide, what is it going to do on the first round of combat? What is it going to do on the second round of combat?
Yep.
What might be a cool layer action if it's your BBEG, big bad evil guy, for people that don't know what that means. Like, how's that person going to work? What kinds of abilities might they be able to do out of combat? But you don't have to go nuts with that. Give them 2, give them 3, but don't go nuts, because what you don't want is, you don't want to convolute or overcomplicate what that person represents. You really just need the guts and the bones. You don't need
You also
all the
need to
flesh and everything
decide.
else.
You also need to decide if they're going to fight alone. If they're intended to be an encounter that is with minions in addition to them, maybe it's a phased battle. The BBE starts out as, I'm just generic druid guy, and now I take my necro form. There's a lot of different options there to give some flavor and difference to your monster feels. But absolutely,
That's
the backstory
why
is going to tell you.
Yeah, that's why the monster manual, and even the new Monsters of the Multiverse, which I barely glanced at because it just came out, that's why they have stat blocks in there for powerful NPCs that you can interact with. It's so you don't fall down the rabbit hole of spending all that time and energy of making a player character, printing out that sheet, or getting a PDF of that sheet, and having all of that information that you just don't need. You just don't.
There's a couple of especially in D&D Beyond, but there's a couple of some of the non-source books, the story adventures that have pre-made like casters and pre-made warriors and fighters that are stat blocks.
Yeah.
And dude, the number of times I've just, because they randomly started to fight somebody who was skilled and I didn't create that character, I just went, okay, I'm gonna take this random stat block because that's all I need right now. It's a lifesaver, right? So that kind of stuff, I think, really helps, and that's good that they're starting to do that even more in the new monster stuff.
They need to, and they've started developing, thankfully, powerful NPCs that you can plug in. Because I bet you, if you look through Monster of the Multiverse, there's probably something in there that you could use for that evil druid. There's probably something. And worst case scenario, find the archdruid or whatever in one of the older monster manuals or companions that have come out, and just tweak it. Oh, you want this to be an evil guy that has necromancer powers? Give them 3 necromantic abilities, and all of a sudden, poof, you're done.
Right.
You don't need the full spell list of all the druid spells. You just
also, things you can do is like find where nature and death meet, and then design your abilities around that. So, for example, a lot of druids that are obsessed or okay with death, you might find in a swamp, for example.
Sure.
So those kind of things help. So in a swamp, what kind of abilities would a druid have? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that gets into layer actions and all kinds of
and it also ties right back to your backstory, right? Like ties right back into that. What's the location that they're normally in? That.
Oh, CJ's in chat. Sorry, I didn't even
great.
see that. Yeah, so she's saying, right, I'm trying to avoid that. Yes, so you want to edit, and yes, that is what you're going for. Great. I think we've covered it, but yeah, you really just want to skim down anything you don't need and just have the main bullet points of what you absolutely need. And remember, if this is a monster, monsters usually have inflated hit points compared to a player character. If you make a player character and use that as a monster, they're going to get dropped in the first round.
Yeah.
They might not even get to go.
A good general rule is that every monster has the toughness feat.
Sure.
Essentially,
Yeah.
if you assume that the monster, that's how sometimes I use player characters. Like if I have a low-level player character that I want to turn into a monster, give them for free the toughness feat and increase their armor class a little bit, and boom,
because
quick monster.
Something we'll talk about later is action economy. Now, with action economy, if your big bad evil guy only goes once, because let's say, that they don't have multi-attack or whatever, and they're only going once and they don't have legendary actions for whatever reason, they're going to get to go once, and then all of the player characters will get to wail on that person, and then they get to go one more time. So unless that big bad evil guy has a ton of minions or like something protecting them, they need those hit points to be able to survive for at least 3 rounds. And I think most D&D fights go between 3 and 5 rounds. That's sort of the sweet spot. You don't want to go much beyond 5 rounds unless it's a really epic thing.
Right.
Yeah. You're almost better off to do a combat that's 3 rounds and then a pause, a break, and then they move on to the next thing, and then another combat that's 3 rounds, than doing a 6-round epic fight.
Sticky Pants says, or someone shoots an urn of power.
Yeah. Touche.
Whisper Josephine says, Revivify, etc. are necromancy spells, but necromancers can't use them. Interesting. I remember a time in D&D when healing was an evocation, but was in fact necromancy. I liked that personally. And for my worlds, healing magic is necromancy because it's the powers over life force. But that's also why I didn't necessarily have necromancers be a moral thing. Right, like a necromancer, just I have power over life force. Don't judge me on what I can do. Judge me on how I use it. Kalimvor, for example, in Forgotten Realms, the god of the dead, he's neutral because he said the whole point of it. He doesn't like undead because undead are fighting like it's a bastardization of the death. Their soul should be in the land where dead people go. But he's not an evil god. He's a neutral god, and that, I think that's really probably what death is like. Death probably just neutral and doesn't care. It's just a force of nature. So it would make sense to me that some druids would have powers over death. It just makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So
part of the reason why I made why can't I remember his name? The guy I just played in in Fortune and Fate. I can't remember my own character's name. Anyways, the reason why I made him as one of my options for your character for you guys to choose was because I thought it was cool to have a druid that was Circle of Spores that kind of rode that line of what is evil, what is good. I did not play in the Fiasco game, and that was actually somebody else's question. I was in Mexico, and the internet was not great, so I didn't get to play, which is unfortunate. But on Wednesday of this week, we are going to do Fortune and Fate again, and it's going to be the same cast. Gabe will be running, hopefully. There's no more tornadoes. And you'll get to see more of those characters. So you even get to see more of Zeph, which is fun because Jalen is a great player.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. He's so cool.
I am having some memory issues, Whisper Josephine. Don't judge me.
It's all that Mexico era. Goobus McDorkle, thank you for the tier 1. Thank you for the tier 1 gifting of subs. We appreciate you. All right. So
next question.
Next question.
Dice and Capes. The one thing that's always gives me problems is figuring out how to reconfigure enemies for different CR levels. Oh, Dice and Capes. Oh, Dice and Capes. I feel your pain.
I have, so this also kind of goes into like what I asked the question in the Discord as well, which was, what monster creation resources do people use? One I found very early on was on Reddit, and it's a monster quick stats by CR table that you can search for on Google. It should be the first thing that pops up. Monster quick stats by CR table. What this taught me, and it's this stat table is based on the loose descriptions that they give in the DMG about how monsters are built. The things that stand out to me the most is that what you really care about in order is hit points, average damage around, and then armor class.
Okay.
And but CR is more of a rather than a point to hit, it's one CR is super big. And it goes back to what you're talking about, which is like if you have a CR, let's say 5 BBEG, if you don't design him right, he might be a CR5 but feel more like a CR1 to a group of CR5 people.
Sure.
Because CR is more about the encounter rather than necessarily that particular creature. And then it takes into that creature, depending on whether they have layer actions, they're legendary, they're, mythic, all these different things. So it becomes that CR is essentially useless in terms of determining things, at least in my experience. Maybe someone out there
CR is it's a joke. It's a joke.
It is.
Like it means nothing. Like
I'm hoping that
really
that's why
just means
some
nothing.
of the monster stuff that they're releasing is maybe making some tweaks to all of that to make it a little bit more clear. Because
100%.
It used to be a lot more clear. It was a lot easier to do because you knew exactly what a CR calculated to. This doesn't necessarily tell you.
But like characters are more powerful than what they were when the game first started. And the subclasses are more powerful and the spells are more powerful. So it makes sense that all of the monsters' CRs, in theory, in your mind, you should just lower that number if you really want to use it to figure out what you're going to throw at your PCs. And also realize that some player characters are power gamers and some are not. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's different schools of play when it comes to D&D, which is great. But if you know that your players know their characters and know the rules and they're picking the most powerful options, like you have Twilight clerics and what have you in your party, then you get to throw nastier stuff at them. You get to upgrade the monsters if you want. You get to give them cooler abilities or give them magical items so that it's not just loot they find in a chest. You want the flaming sword? Well, guess what? This hobgoblin has a flaming sword and he's going to hit you with it until you kill him,
or
and
take
then
it from
you
him.
get the flaming sword.
That's right,
yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So something that I've been thinking about with CR is, and there's a bunch of thought processes on this, is, or what I've seen anyways, is you tend to want to lower the number by at least 2, if not 3, which is hard if you have a lower level thing because the CRs are already so low, but maybe just divide the number by 2 or something to really gauge if that CR is even going to come close. That being said, I ran a one shot where my friends fought a black dragon and he had minions. He had other things that they had to fight to get to him. And I could tell within the first round of combat that they were going to drop him in the second round. So what I had him do, and I had this in my back pocket and I didn't know if I was going to use it or not. This was kind of like my ace in the hole card, is I gave him an ability where he was able to animate the dead corpse of another dragon that was in his lair that he had already killed.
You introduced a phase.
Exactly. Right. And that was his special ability, his Hail Mary that I had. And when he animated that other dragon corpse and they had to fight the undead zombie dragon as well as the black dragon, then it became an actual epic fight. But I just had that in my back pocket. And that's something that I think you should always do, especially if you want it to be the epic fight and not just a random encounter that they come across with along the way. Is give every monster, every nasty monster, every mid boss some kind of ace in the hole ability.
Yep. I do that often too. And sometimes I don't even know what it is until, it'd be really cool in this moment right now because they could do that. And that's their ace in the hole.
Yeah.
JT Justice asks, well, how do you determine proper XP? Well, CR still has a use, and you can still use it to determine XP. But in my opinion, JT Justice, it's better just to move to milestone. I find that that's way more impactful. People feel stronger, and it gives a better feeling of satisfaction because the milestone indicates like, you leveled up because you made a major you made it to a major story point.
Right.
So that's what I usually do.
Yeah, and another thing that I've noticed that some people can do if they really want to do XP instead of milestone is, instead of getting into the fine minutia of the numbers, round everything. So like if they've killed 20 goblins and they've killed 10 bugbears and they fought one troll, to me that sounds like it should be enough for them to go from level 2 to level 3. Like, round it up. Even though you're giving them chunks of XP, just make sure that they're going to hit that milestone. It's still XP though, so if you like, a player's gone for several sessions and then they come back and you want to give credit to the people that were there that did the work, they still didn't get those chunks of XP that they missed, if that makes sense, if you want to run it that way. But honestly, you want to keep all the players around the same level. So I wouldn't keep that person behind from more
and
than
naturally
like a
it
session.
won't. Naturally it won't, because even when they get to the next level of XP, the growth of how much XP you need is sort of exponential, and so eventually they will catch up. Fairly quickly. As we saw with Uggo. Uggo was catching up pretty quickly, and that was just milestone. That wasn't even like, if you had seen actual XP numbers, it probably would have been even faster. So,
it for sure would have been faster because you were so far back.
Right. Yeah. And like the first fight would have made me like probably level 3, like that. It's that kind of
exactly
that XP amount. I mean, hey, JT Justice, not poor Uggo. Uggo made that choice. That's all on him. He made that choice. Well, JT, I don't know if it's necessarily a random arbitrary number. Again, the DMG has some information on how to attribute XP to a CR, but XP changes based on how many of the CR you put in the fight. So I highly recommend using D&D Beyond for that, because it calculates all that XP for you.
Yeah, and the other thing that bugs me about CR is like, well, what if there's a nasty layer that they're fighting in?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do you give XP for that? What if you've added in some kind of extra nasty situation where they like have a hostage, and if they don't get to the hostage in time, the hostage gets killed. They should get XP for they should get XP for saving the hostage instead of just killing all the monsters first.
And D&D, the DMG identifies that kind of stuff too, but that's not necessarily tied into the CR XP. But layers are in fact calculated into the CR XP. So technically, if you look at the CR of a dragon and its layer, and it has depictions of its layer, that XP, that part of the layer is built into that CR.
Right. So. But I mean, like, let's say they fight 5 goblins in a really nasty layer. That's completely different than if they're fighting 5 goblins out in the middle of the woods.
Correct. And as such, you would increase the CR overall because you added a layer, and that would increase the XP based on the calculation.
Viking Rogue, that is a great question.
Yep.
Do you want to hit that one?
Yeah.
Shall I? Okay.
Absolutely. I can. Viking Rogue, one of the things I try to determine straight off the bat before we even start playing is, are we in a low magic world? Are we in a high magic world? How does magic work in this world? If it's low magic items are going to be very rare and very powerful because of that. In a high, think of Lord of the Rings, for example, is a very low magic world, considering, meaning not everybody in the world has it available, and that it's costly to do it, which they in the books mention many times. But in most of D&D that I've played, it's been medium or high magic worlds, high fantasy, high magic, and in those, it's based on level, really. Your uncommons are going to be between 1 and 5. Your rares are going to be between 5 and 10, or 6 and 10, excuse me, and then your ultra rares and artifacts, so on and so forth, in the 5 increments in a high magic world.
Yeah, my big hint on magical items, so that they actually mean something and it's not just a +1 sword, is magic items should always be tied into the story. Always. You should never be giving out unless they intentionally seek it out and buy it, or get it by doing some task, and even then that's still story based. But the one thing that always drives me nuts about certain D&D games is if you just come across a bunch of random magic items that mean nothing, like you rolled on a random generator and it doesn't really fit into the story, and the monsters didn't use them for whatever reason, and it's not really well protected or guarded, then all of a sudden it becomes very video game. So if you're into,
if that's what you're looking for, great.
yeah, if you're into storytelling based RP, which is what we're primarily talking about here, again, if you just want a power game, there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally cool. Even if you're power gaming, though, I still feel like it's more interesting if the items have a story behind them.
Well, I think every item can have a story behind
why find a plus? What's that?
I think every item, even in those ways where you randomly roll on a table, you can give every item a random,
exactly,
a story there for sure.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. So what I'm trying to say is, the long and short of it is, give each item a reason for being there, and give each item some form of history, and it can be very, very simple, right, and very, very brief.
Right.
But if you know that even if it's a +1 dagger and you just think your rogue really wants it and they really need it and it's going to help balance things out and what have you, what is special about that +1 dagger? If that makes, if that makes sense.
Now,
what's the story behind it? Right. What does it look like? Who has it? Why do they have it? And if you're getting it from that person, make that monster use it against them. Do not just have it in a box that the PCs find. And just bear in mind that now you're powering up that PC. So not only are they getting, when they level up, they're getting more abilities and more powers, but the more magical items you give them, the more powerful they're going to become too.
There's also a diminishing returns with magic items where they become too much work, right? Because now you've got magic items in every slot. I've got all these abilities that are tied to this magic ability. I have all of my class stuff. I'm now level 15. I have all these spells. It starts to become more and more and more and more work. So you just be cognizant of that when you're giving out magic items. Yeah. And honestly, even if you do have, for example, you're in a goblin. Let's go back to your goblin lair. They kill all the goblins, and in the lair there's a box full of magic items, or a box that has a couple of magic items in it. Have a story for those ready. Like, they stole that one from a guy they killed on the road. This one, that kind of stuff can be very loose, very shallow, because most of the time I don't even know if the players are going to find out. Like, how are they going to find that out? You could always put, I guess, pages or notes somewhere in the goblin lair where they're like, killed a guy today and grabs pretty sword, and that was it. Then you've got a little bit of like why it's there, and the players go, cool, great, moving on. Even
if the players never find out the full backstory, it's so great for you to know, because here's just a juicy idea for you. Let's say those goblins, steal that item from whoever on the road, and then you run across that person later on and you have that item on you and they see that. They're going to want that item back.
Right. Hey, and where'd you get that?
Beautiful RP.
Yeah.
I mean, that's chef's kiss, call back to whatever. And even if the goblins couldn't figure out how something worked, and that's why it was in the box, maybe they were afraid of it for some reason. Maybe they didn't understand how it worked for some reason. Maybe it's not a weapon, so it's not something that they can easily use. It's more of like a utility item, which makes it more interesting.
Right. It also
maybe it was cursed. Thank you. I am the Raven Queen.
It might also, that just sort of subconsciously drives with your players that the world is living, that it's not static, that it has some, even if you don't know all of the interconnecting pieces, because it would be impossible for you to do that. Your brain could not do that.
Sure.
We can barely get computers to do that. And we've gotten really good at that. But if you notice, they're also taking shortcuts where it's like, we have a living world. It's like, but they only know what's happening as soon as you get into that area. So it's like there's a living world, but in that area, they're like, I met a guy down the street. And sure enough, the guy down the street, if you go down there later on, will be there, like in GTA, for example. but in our worlds, like, that's a vital thing. Like, yeah, and it gives you just a jumping off point to start cool adventures and stories, right? It gives you an excuse to either distract or get deeper into the main story in a different arm, in a different way. So, thank you for the subscription, Ninja Padero.
Yeah.
Padero. Thank you very much.
Padero.
14 months. Welcome. Padero. Ninja Padero.
So we have enough time to actually make this monster.
Yep.
I'm going to rapid fire these questions at you, Ron. Are you ready?
Yep, ready.
Okay. So, K-Jack, why weren't you in the most recent Fiasco? I was in Mexico. Gamershare, question. What's the wildest stat block combo that you've put together for a homebrew monster?
Wildest stat block combo that I have? God.
Yeah.
A god.
A god.
So I took the concept of Kelemvor and made him a mind flayer lich.
Cool.
Because of some things and some reasons that I can't say out loud because Heather's still here and they might fight him soon. But turned him into a different. So that's my crazy stat block. The Archlich, former god of the dead, who is now a mind flayer.
Beautiful. Music Man 77. Do you consider taking inspiration from different mythologies for homebrew monsters? Heck yeah.
Absolutely.
Heck yeah.
Everyone.
Mythology is the best place to create homebrew
It's where
monsters.
most of these monsters came from. Like, honestly, It's where most of them came from.
Yes. If so, how do you adapt them so that it keeps players guessing about abilities? That's a great segue into something that I was talking to Ron about ahead of time. I hate the fact that monsters in Dungeons and Dragons 5e barely have any vulnerabilities. It drives me nuts. They have immunities, they have resistances, they don't have vulnerabilities. Reward your players for doing research. Reward your players for
using their knowledge.
Yes. Let their skills do something. So when they make their Arcana check, when they do their religion check, they know that that werewolf is not susceptible to silver, but is susceptible to wolfsbane, which is an herb, which they can go acquire in such and such a forest. And then they can use that against that werewolf in that fight. Yes, always attach what I like to call either vulnerability or like a story point to that monster. If you want that monster to, like what Ron was saying, live and breathe and be a part of that world, because these monsters should be unique. Using generic goblins is fine from minions, but if you want a goblin to stick out, to be special, to be a boss or a mid-boss, you have to give them something interesting. Maybe they found a cursed magical item. Maybe they're a wizard or a sorcerer. Maybe they're a shaman.
In 3.5, we had templates that you could apply.
Exactly.
To things. Templates.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So my Music Man, I don't know who you are, but thank you so much for this question. My big tip is if you're doing mythology, you can use the base stat block of a monster that kind of works for whatever that mythological creature is. Like people like to use Witcher stuff all the time in D&D. I feel like you could make any Witcher monster that exists out of a stat block from a D&D monster, and then you add in the vulnerability, just like the vulnerabilities that they have in the Witcher series. So that's a great example of how you could inject mythology as well. Like mythology, if you read up on a monster and find out that the Medusa is affected by its own reflection, that's an easy one. Like that's a great one to have in there.
Taking monsters and slamming them together is interesting, right? Like, what if the Medusa's hair were more like Blink Dog tentacles?
That's trippy,
right? Yeah, exactly. Just stuff that just or what if the hair is, instead of tentacles, are beholder eyeballs?
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. Yep.
Yeah, and I also think that fits into another concept that I wanted to briefly mention, is that monsters are not player characters, which we already talked about, but monsters don't have to follow the rules. You can have monsters that have several reactions. You can have monsters that have bonus actions. You can give them a bonus action if you think that they need it so that they can actually stand toe to toe against the player characters. And again, these aren't just your generic minions. These aren't just random encounters that the player characters are coming across. These are the monsters that like mean something to the story. They mean something to the encounter.
Cjo asks, so then would you work out the damage for that, or would it be insta kill? Well, specifically if you're smashing monsters together, what I like to do is use monster stat blocks like modular pieces. Like, okay, the Medusa has the hair, so she's not going to get any of the abilities that she gets normally for hair from Medusa, but this snakes. Blink Dog has some abilities that I'll now pull into this Medusa, and you've generated a new monster that a character may not necessarily know how to fight effectively.
Right. Yeah. Right. I also think what's interesting about that is if you have players in your game that know the basic monsters, you then just threw them for a loop.
And now they have to think. Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. They have to role play the situation out. They can't
expect
just
a lot of that in season 2. I'm just saying.
And Cjo, if you're asking about insta kill as far as like the monsters' vulnerabilities or weaknesses, I don't think instant kill is necessary unless it's really specific vulnerability. Like they have to do all kinds of crazy stuff to make,
like an arrow dipped in the poison of an innocent.
Yeah. No, like what I'm just talking about a vulnerability is, and it's just double damage.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you would.
They're vulnerable to fire rather than resistant to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's go faster. Any guidance on treacherous idol? Any guidance on main creature type like undead, monstrosity, etc.?
Have at it.
That means.
I think they may have been asking like in terms of when we create our monster, but they also might be asking like how do you determine like the type that you're going to make? And again, I think that goes back to what you were talking about before: is make your monsters based on your story. That will help.
Yeah,
that'll give you a lot of guidance.
Yeah.
Also, generally, those also want to say generally those categories have specific feels to them. So, like a monstrosity is kind of like a chimera. You just happen to happen because some things in the world made it happen. But an abjuration might be something that's from underground or from a different plane of existence, and that gives it a different feel. Undead is obviously charged with that. It comes with a lot of stuff. Humanoids of different types, they come with things. So there's a lot of options for those particular categories.
Yeah, and I don't know if the creature type is super important unless you start getting into like whether or not it's a beast versus a monster.
I think the only type really matters is for spell stuff and making sure.
Yeah. Okay. Cariel, can one play as a monster as a player character? Yes. Maybe like a younger version or something. I don't know what monster you're talking about specifically, but I feel like a lot of the races that have been coming out or that have been in existence for a long period of time used to be monsters, and people loved them so much they were like, I want to play this, and it became a race. When it gets tricky is when you start including monsters that are naturally super powerful, or if they're like four-legged centaurs and you're in a game where it's like there's lots of climbing, and then it's like, well, how is the centaur going to climb? And like that just gets sort of logistically
climbing
a little
gear,
weird.
Bro. Climbing gear. It's got 2 arms. You can climb.
That's a very impressively strong upper body.
Has to, like by evolution,
Yeah. But as far as a way
cliff
to
centaurs.
make an overly powerful monster a playable race is you can do a younger version or a baby version, but what I think is even easier is to say mix it with a humanoid. Like that's why Dragonborn exists. That's why they're a thing, because everybody wanted to play a dragon at one point, and they were like, and I actually have rules from like an older edition of D&D where you can play a actual dragon, and you start out as a wormling and build yourself up. But so many people wanted to do that they made Dragonborn. That became a thing. And so I feel like the easiest way would just be mix the monster with a humanoid, and then you're good. which is why there's so many animal races, because everybody wanted to play an animal or
animals,
some
yeah.
kind of animal mix
Yep.
or a were creature. So you just say, okay, well, let's just make a race.
Well, and then that's why we now see Minotaur and all,
Yeah.
Bugbear and all these different races as playable characters, because people are like, I really want to play that as a character. It just makes sense. And another way to do that is like, think about, like, read the, for example, if you wanted to create a Mind Flayer player character, think about what a Mind Flayer is and its lore, and then try to figure out a way how that would fit in, and then go, okay, well, Mind Flayer probably has some psionic abilities, but let's say it's partially damaged because it's not tied to its hive mind, so it's less powerful, so it only gets psychic cantrips or whatever, and it doesn't get anything else. There are plenty. The way that I do it, and I really like, is I look for a race that it currently exists and go, okay, could I make some changes here that feel
smart.
right?
Yeah, that's smart.
That would still be, because then you don't have to necessarily worry about balance so much because it's already kind of built into that character. Yeah. So that's kind of how I like to do it.
Yeah. Okay. JT Justice, giving monsters items or potions that may be left after battle or help them TPK. Good idea or too powerful? Also, if you make a monster too powerful and kill the party, would making it a dream sequence be so bad? So JT Justice, just like I was saying, where you need the lever of, wow, they're going to kill this thing in one round, I need to do something, ace in the hole. You need to also have a lever that you can pull that's like, oh, I need to drop this thing's hit points by half. Otherwise, it's going to TPK the party within a round or two. You need to be able to shift back and forth either way, especially if you're using homebrew monsters. If you're using stuff out of the book and everything is very balanced, you're probably going to be okay.
Even then, you still may find that you need a lever.
Yeah, and giving monsters the items, I feel, and this is just me personally, I feel that it is more interesting if they have the items on them than it is if you find them in a box afterwards. It doesn't mean that they have to have all the items, but if they have a potion of invisibility and they have that on their person, that gives them the ability to go invisible if the fight turns against them, and it rewards the players that are smart enough to go after that guy and drop him or girl, drop that monster before they can use that potion. It incentivizes smart, strategic fighting. So I am all about giving them those items, because those items can be this monster isn't powerful enough lever that can literally save them. Yeah.
And also, if you had that creature that turned invisible because it had an invisibility potion on them, then when you take it down, they have an empty potion bottle on them.
Yeah. Or maybe they have another potion on them and it looks
their second one
the same. And now the player characters know that that's probably another invisibility potion because they saw him drink the first one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Ages 13. Inspiration-wise, I find nightmares are a good starting point. I was a little kid back in the 80s, saw too much unsolved mysteries, and when my parents left me at my grandparents' for a weekend and I had a nightmare about being on an island in the Bermuda Triangle where there was a large, sinister-looking circle of stones and my family and other people were disappearing one by one, I thought some kind of a cult was sacrificing them at the stone circle. This is great. But then the largest stone opened red glowing eyes and had a tentacle-like arm reach out of the top and tried it. Is there a question in here? To drag me into a fiery pit.
They're answering because I asked what resources to use for monster creation.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So years later, I couldn't help but be reminded of this by a roper in D&D. Ropers are awesome.
They're great.
So I made up a fire elemental that looks like a basalt column using a roper and an aboleth as jumping off points, and I called it an obelisk. Obelisk plus aboleth.
And Ages is just talking about what we talked about earlier, which is taking two monsters and slamming them together.
Merging them,
Merging them, Yep.
Okay, JT Justice. I made one by taking a bandit and slowly adding feats and abilities to it while adjusting AC and HP. That's exactly what we were talking about.
We've been talking about, yeah.
Gave it crossbow expert mixed with dual wielding feat, +1 AC and draw speed with bows, then trick shots, which had a list of choices. Once I finished, I was like, hey, This is Green Arrow / Hawkeye.
Perfect.
That's
Great.
And that to me is beautiful, because you're taking a basic boring bandit and you're adding things to it that are story based, hopefully, that are going to make that encounter so much more dynamic and interesting. And that's what you want your fights to be. You don't want them to be boring. You want them to be dynamic.
Yeah, and even if the story came after this, you have an interesting bad guy that you just built up that can now become that thing, right? Like, oh, the idea is that maybe JT Justice happened to build this thing and then had an idea that sparked that. Now you can use that, right? Like saying guy is like Green Arrow Hawkeye, he's Robin Hood if you're playing in fantasy, right? Sure. He's Robin Hood with trick shots. Now you can play with that all you want. Like there's a lot of places to go with that. So well done, JT Justice. Well done.
Yeah. Great example. Damn Kid 3, update on how Jeff is doing at his new job. Do you follow him on social media?
Yeah. He's doing good. He's doing great. I did actually reach out to Jeff this morning because I wanted it to come straight from his mouth. And he says, "Thank you, everyone. This is very sweet. They can watch me every Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on twitch.tv/FCF, which is fan controlled football." And he said, "I miss all of you." Yeah, very sweet.
Okay. Aegis 13, how do you calculate CR on a homebrew monster, and does CR even really mean anything?
We covered that.
Yeah.
in plenty detail.
Honestly, like CR is, don't get me started. We don't have time for it. Dyson Capes, great question. I wish more books would show the same creature at multiple CR levels to give a better idea of how they do it. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Just boost the base monster. Don't invent something from scratch when you don't need to. Don't make your job harder as a dungeon master if you don't need to. Yeah.
And a lot of like the stuff that comes out on Dungeon Master's Guide or any of the Kickstarters that I've seen out there, a lot of them do that, where it's like, this was designed for 7 levels, for a party of 7 levels. But if you need to dial it back, here's one at 5, here's one at, if you need to dial up, here's one at 10, here's one at 15. And normally what's changing are your hit points. Maybe some abilities come or go, like they get crossed out depending on what level you get them, and then other parts that they do is like you just do more damage. It's higher hit points and more damage. Right. Most of the time is how I've seen that.
And sometimes action economy.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like that, sometimes they'll like, okay, the 10th level character gets an ability that they wouldn't get at 7th level, so they just say don't, and they put a level next to the ability, which I thought was really smart.
Yeah, that is smart. Johnny Valentine, Jared and Ron, will you be using the new updated race rules for Monsters of the Multiverse or sticking with the old rules in Season 2? Example, like how orcs have a new aggressive bonus action in Monsters of the Multiverse that gives temp HP. I haven't looked at Monsters of the Multiverse as much as Ron has, but to be honest with you, we know, spoiler alert, we know the cast of Season 2. We know the races and classes of Season 2. We have a proposed start date, which we're not allowed to say because Morgan said not to.
We can't say. We'll just blame Morgan. Morgan did it.
Yeah, but what we can say is that we are going to be making a huge announcement later on this week.
This week.
Yes. So we know all that information
huge
already.
Announcement.
Johnny Valentine. So what I can say is this. Most of the races that are being played in Season 2 are set, and we are not too worried about what Monsters of the Multiverse is going to do to those races. We're working on a bunch of stuff that is going to be leading to the ramp up release of when we're starting Season 2, including a teaser. So that is why Ron and I swore that we weren't going to give away.
Can't say anything.
Yeah.
I want to say it so bad. I want to say it. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah. You'll be surprised. I think you'll be surprised by class choices. I think you'll be surprised by character choices, by races. it's going to be very different than season 1. Very different.
Very different.
Yeah. I mean, it's a new world, essentially.
That's our goal. Our goal is to make
Yeah.
it feel like a level up and different. That's absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So soon.
Sean.
I mean this week.
Sean0418 says, "Who cares what Morgan says? We the watchers own this. Morgan better watch it or he won't get anything positive." That's a way to get something. Hold someone hostage. That's for sure.
Yeah. I don't want to make Morgan sound like the bad guy.
He is not the bad guy here. We are giving him a hard time on purpose. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all the questions. We have no time left to do. All right.
We're gonna go a little over. We're gonna go a little over.
But we're gonna give you what we promised.
Yep.
Because that's how Ron and I are.
That's it. That's what we do.
Okay. So I had all these other things that I wanted to talk about.
Look, dude, we need more time. That's the problem with this kind of stuff. We get into it and we need more time.
Yeah. Well, you and I can talk about this stuff forever.
And nonstop. That's absolutely true. We could do this for a living, literally.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to go through these bullet points real quick. So one idea that I had as far as homebrew monsters go is that you can do action points. So 3 action points per round. This is for like your epic monster, not your just run of the mill. 3 action points can be like a big, nasty breath attack. 2 action points could be for like an area effect. 1 action point could be for just a regular attack. And then that's
how legendary actions typically work.
Exactly. I just feel like it's a little bit simpler than legendary actions.
Well, but unless you have
the legendary actions happen in between player characters, then legendary actions work in a different way.
Oh, really? I've always used them as in between other players.
I'm talking about like if you have a monster that goes on a specific initiative and they don't have legendary actions because they're not legendary monsters.
Got it.
Then you can do the action point thing to make the monster more interesting because then it gives you more tools in your toolbox for what you're going to do.
Using the
as opposed to the generic stat block stuff.
Yeah, using that legendary action concept, but outside of legendary actions.
Exactly. Always reward lore and research. We already talked about that.
Yep.
Monsters don't have to follow the same rules as players. Add a lure. Ooh, this is a good one. So lures are if they want to find that monster, if they want to bait that monster, if they want that monster to, attack them aggressively instead of play smartly, lures can be a great way to make that monster feel more real. Like, why would the monster always attack the player characters? Is it because they always want to eat the player characters? Wouldn't it be interesting if there's a lure where the monster really wants the magical item that they have on them? Or
Force monsters.
Yeah, exactly. So lures, don't forget about those. Bonus actions on monsters are great. I don't think bonus actions should be attacks, though. I feel like bonus actions on monsters are better, in my opinion, are better to do things that are like movement based. Either they move the other players around or they move themselves around as a bonus action. Maybe it calls a minion. Maybe it's a specific atmospheric effect, like it slows or it, creates difficult terrain.
Enhances the next attack.
Yeah, there you go. That's a great one. Passive abilities. Passive abilities are abilities that monsters can have. And this is just to give you guys ideas when we create this monster in a few seconds. Passive abilities are things that the monster always has. Always. So the cheesy example would be a great adult ancient red dragon. You get within, a certain amount of space and it immediately does heat damage to you just because you're within that aura effect. Or as soon as you get close to the monster that's emitting this horrible, smog like cloud around it, it immediately affects the player characters. But it's always on, it's always going. It's a passive thing that they don't have to enact. And it can make fun for atmospheric things as well. This is a great idea. Maybe add a spell if you want to tweak a monster. So that goblin leader could have one spell that they can cast, and that thing can be a spell-like ability, and then you don't have to invent it yourself, and you know how powerful it is, because if you want the monster to be a certain challenge rating or a little bit higher than a certain challenge rating, you just give them that one spell and they can do it, once per combat or 3 times per combat, depending on what the spell is. Or maybe it's a cantrip and they can do it as many times as they want. They do that a lot in Monsters of the Multiverse.
Yeah,
did you notice that?
Yeah, I did. One of the ones
Ranged
I noticed
attacks.
is range attacks. There's also interesting new way to handle counter spelling in Monsters of the Multiverse, which I really like, which is giving it a spell-like ability that can stop a spell, but it doesn't waste the spell slot of the person casting the spell. They can do it a number of times a day. I thought that was a really good, clever workaround of the counterspell issue.
Yeah, that's a good point. Weakness and vulnerabilities, we talked about that a lot, but I feel like that's huge. We just did a one-shot recently, Ron and I did, where we added a vulnerability because the fight was just taking too long. And the vulnerability was that the players could attack the tree that the creature was attached to, and it would do just as much damage as if they attacked the creature itself. Yeah. And I thought that was brilliant for Ron to just throw that in there, because otherwise it was going to be a slog. They were still going to win, but it was going to take too long. Right. Yeah.
And I wanted to reward someone who, it was really an improvised choice, because I wanted to reward the player who had the idea. And so it was also, I was like, that's an easy solution to our problem. Great. So look for those kind of things. Your players will help, especially when they're trying to solve a problem that looks very obvious to them. Give them this, reward them for thinking outside of the box.
Other topics that I wanted to discuss that we just don't have time to is to talk about, and we can do this on a different cooldown, is legendary resistance. Is it lame or is it not? Let's discuss. Legendary actions. Is it lame or is it not? Let's discuss. And layer actions. Are they lame or are they cool?
I like all of those, but that's just me.
I agree, but I feel like
there's some discussion and room to work with those.
Tweak.
For sure.
You got to tweak. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay, so let's make a monster.
Cool. How are we going to start this? How do you want to start?
I always like to go with setting first.
Cool.
So where would we encounter this monster? And I'm going to get a piece of paper and something.
We're going to, people in chat, please give us some ideas. Just spit out some ideas. Need a settings. So we're going to build a monster. So throw us some setting concepts. I do want to answer. Mr. Ryan says, I'm curious about this. You get a chance to assassinate a PC and replace them with a mimic or doppelganger. Do you do it? No, because I don't want to piss off my players. Now, if it's something I had a conversation with the player previously, maybe not in specific, but hey, you might be taken out or so on and so forth. Sure, but then also make sure that they have a way to get out of that, or somehow, make that the major problem of what's going on. Just don't be that DM. Don't be that DM that likes to kill PCs. For
100%. So I see Cave, Canyon, Cove. Yep. So I kind of like the idea.
Well, I also saw Graveyard, Ocean.
Right. I like any of you that are out there in chat that see somebody else's suggestion that you like, repeat it, because then there's a higher chance that we'll end up using it.
You weren't there, but there was a little bit of a conversation in the last fiasco about, was it a cave or a cove? Because we didn't know which one it was. So really? The joke became, it's a cave in a cove.
Let's do it.
Do it. A cave and a cove.
So a cave and a cove is where the player characters are going to run across this.
And let's say that the cave is shallow, like it does have water in it, but it's shallow enough that you can wade into the cave.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Okay, so the setting is a cave and a cove. That's where our player characters are going to run across this particular monster.
I love this already. Yeah. A cave in a cove.
Okay. So another thing that I like to think about when it comes to monsters is, what does this monster eat? What is this monster? How does this monster live? Does it live with other monsters that are similar to it? Is it a solo monster? Is it a big boss monster that's got minions? So let's talk about what it eats. Not slime. We're not doing slime.
No, it doesn't eat slime.
We have too many slime things already.
I think Dyson Cape said giant crab. I think that's suggesting the monster in the cave, but I like that as the food source.
I like that it eats crabs. It eats crabs that are inside of the, whether
But I
they're
also like
giant
that
or
it's
regular size.
giant. I like that they
Okay.
specifically like to eat giant crab.
They like to eat giant crabs. Okay. So
So
then
what can
this monster has
we?
got to be pretty big if
Right,
it's taking out giant
correct.
crabs.
Or there's a lot of them.
Okay. There's
So
a lot of
either it's
giant
one
crabs.
maybe it's one big monster, or it's a group of monsters that have killed a giant crab and are feeding the whole
Oh,
group.
I see a group. I
Yeah.
see. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so right now we have that it's a cave inside of a cove and that they eat giant crabs. So this monster to me could go one of two ways. Either it could be one giant thing that's able to kill a giant crab and eat it, or like you were saying, it's a group. So we need to decide, is this a group of monsters or is this an individual? That's a pretty easy vote.
Yeah, I'm actually looking
Right
up
now
what
I see right now I see group.
because we giant crab is an actual beast that
Oh
is
yeah.
in the rule set, so we need to look at that to know,
Sure.
because that'll give us some
Sure.
information. So we
Love
know
it.
that a giant crab itself is only 1/8 challenge rating.
Okay.
It has about 15 hit points.
Okay.
They're giant, they're medium sized, but so the thing is either going to be medium itself or large, maybe bigger, but I would imagine either medium or large. So giant crabs aren't like dire crabs. Dire crabs are very dangerous. Giant crabs are pretty low on the
Right.
dangerous
So
pole.
he's not, it's this creature or this monster or this group of monsters isn't killing monstrous crabs.
Right.
It's just killing really large crabs,
Large
regular
giant
crabs.
crabs, yeah.
Okay. I think most people are saying
Man-sized crab.
group.
Probably the
Most
size of
people are,
Karma,
no,
for example.
there's some individuals. We need to do a
Yeah, we have
poll.
group,
1, 2,
individuals.
3.
Somebody said swarm.
1, 2, 3, 4. Lots of mouths to feed.
Small
5.
group of
Okay, we're going with
monsters.
group.
Yeah, group.
We're going with group.
Group.
Okay, so it's a group of monsters. So a great idea that I think would be if there's lots of giant crabs and these monsters eat those giant crabs, I would say, because I know our setting, the group is not going to be more than like 20. And chances are it's probably going to be even less than that.
Yeah, I would think between 2 and 5 is what I would call the group.
Okay.
That's where my head was at with group. Otherwise,
Okay,
you're talking about swarm, right? Like 20 or plus, it's really a swarm.
Well, we have 5 player characters. Why don't we do 5?
Sure. We can do 5.
So there's 5 of these monsters. And again, monsters can be people. If we want to make it a group of humanoids, we can, or a humanoid-like monster. There's 5 in this cave, in this cove, that are eating these crabs.
I like Lady Carol asks, then they leave the shell or no? You know what that does to me, man? It immediately means like, oh, maybe they use the shells as shields.
Sure.
Those giant crab shells become.
They use the shells for all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's
tools,
what I mean. But
weapons,
tools,
shields,
weapons, shields, armor. Yeah, that's what I mean. Is like they use the shell.
So they use crab pieces. Crab used as tools, weapons, armor. Great. So they're semi-intelligent then, right? Because they're crafting.
Yep.
So I'm going to say crafty.
Yeah. They're going to have at least a low intelligence for sure.
Right. But they're definitely
8 to 12
to craft
intelligence.
Yeah. So maybe they're crafty. We'll say medium intelligence. I mean, they're not like making magical items out of these crabs,
no, I don't
right?
think so. No,
Okay.
I don't think they're that. No, I think of it more like. In fact, I think it might even be cool if we added them sort of similar to the island that they're on, right? Like maybe animus or animal type humanoids.
Whisper Josephine. Do they have a poor cow tied up nearby to provide milk for butter so they can have melted garlic butter to dip the crabs in? Whisper Josephine. Come on.
So the only skill they have is chef.
Yeah. That's the skill that they have.
You know, what kind of animals can we? And the reason I ask that is because then what kind of animals can we think of that exist that eat crabs and live in coves?
That are monstrous, or just animals
or
in
just
general?
animals in general that might eat crabs that live in coves. Eels.
Well,
I think of eels. I think of
don't seals
seals. I think of
and
seals.
like otters and
Otters.
stuff?
Yep. All those kind of
So
things.
maybe
we could do
they're
like otter people.
or like a fur covered otter creature. That's interesting. Because then you don't know if they're evil or good.
Right.
They're kind of neutral.
Right. And maybe they steal things.
Maybe
they're otters.
Maybe they're
otters, so they steal
territorial.
stuff.
Okay, I like that.
And bring it back to their cove, and that's how they get. That's part of how they get back.
Okay, so they're otter people, neutral. So their alignment is neutral. They're not necessarily evil or good. They're But I still like the idea of the fact that they're kind of protective over their crabs.
For sure.
That's how they live.
Well, I think again,
So
otters, they like shinies too, so they're territorial, but they also they're also a little bit thievery, right? Like they go and steal things and bring it back and add it to their territory. And like, no, you can have them back. Yeah, I would say stealthy for sure. They live in a cove.
Okay. Stealthy, thievery. Okay, so when we get into thievery, that immediately is stealthy and thievery. That immediately starts telling me what abilities and powers these otter people could have. And there's only 5 of them. So we can make them somewhat powerful because
there's only 5 of them.
If the player characters actually end up fighting them for some reason, they need to be able to hold their own.
And then, because we're using a natural creature that exists, we can also base some of our powers based on that too. So like otters have a swim speed, for example.
Yeah.
Otters probably also have a climb speed, right? I imagine they might be stealthy or good with their hands or...
I like that. Rogue otter people, Whisper Joe. I like that. So maybe they have sneak attack.
Yeah. Yep.
Huh.
And that's how they get their crabs, right? That's literally how they get the crabs.
Yeah.
They sneak up on the crabs and...
Okay. Okay. So I'm adding sneak attack.
Infinity Hamster says they can go invisible. Well, what if when they stay still in the water, they are invisible?
So I'm going to say swim speed. And then I'm going to say, is it invisible or are they just really good at hiding?
Well, I would say similar to
invisibility
like wood elves.
leads
more of like wood elves. Like they when they stand still in the water, they get advantage in hiding, and they don't need full cover.
Okay, so I'm going to say advantage hiding.
Yeah. See Joe
water.
And Bacon Beard, natural camouflage.
Natural camouflage.
Yeah, similar to like, again, using the things that we've talked about in this episode, look at what wood elves do. Wood elves are capable of doing that, and we just use that ability.
Yeah, okay. So
but apply it to water.
I feel like we have a really good idea of who this monster is story-wise. Let's start giving them some stats. Although, I will say this as a caveat, depending on if we use this in our game or not, and if we end up using this in our game, this is going to stick out in a huge way. But if this does end up popping up into the actual season 2 game, we might have to tweak the stats of the creatures based off of how powerful the player characters have become.
Yeah.
So for now, I'd like to create these creatures at a level 3 party challenge.
Okay.
So imagine all the player characters are level 3 and they're coming across 5 otter folk. I'm going to call them otter folk for now. Until we come up with another name. So we need to come up with their stats. What's their AC? What's their hit points? What's their main attack? We can even tweak the AC because they're wearing crab armor, which is kind of fun. So they could have a slightly higher AC.
I think they just either have the exact armor class that a giant crab has, or slightly less, or
what's a giant crab
15
AC?
Natural armor.
Great, let's do it. That's nasty. I like it. AC 15 crab armor.
Are they small, medium, large?
I like the idea of them being medium because the crabs are medium.
Otter people. So they're like bigger than small people. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
in my head, an otter person would be small, but I actually kind of like that they're a little bit more like they've been injected with some power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to say their AC when they don't have on their crab armor
Yeah.
is still 13 because
Mhm.
they're slippery.
Highly dexterous.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the crab armor really just gives them a +2, which is solid. Okay. Big question here. There's 5 of them. There's 5 player characters. Where do we set their hit points at?
Well, what kind? That's where we start talking about, well, how difficult and at what level do we think they will run upon these?
Third level
Okay.
player characters.
Okay.
I think they should be nasty because, and this is why, because they're neutral monsters. You want to, in my opinion, you want to incentivize RP.
Yeah, for sure.
And if the RP gets to the point to where it gets to a fight for any reason, then it's oh, this is a real challenge because we had the chance to not get into a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, the hit points of a CR3 encounter or monster should be between 101 and 115 hit points.
For just one monster?
For
That's if they're just
single
fighting
CR,
one.
yeah, for a single CR that is CR3. So divide that by 5, which is about 23 hit points.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. So I would say like
the player characters are probably going to be between 20 and 30 hit points each.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I give them like 25 hit points.
Okay. So I'm going to say the average HP is 25.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a few that are less. Maybe there's a few that are more.
Yeah.
Okay. AC 15 and HP of 25 is pretty nasty.
At level 3, yes. And when there's 5 of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I also kind of like the idea that maybe they're a little superstitious. So wouldn't it be fun if there's a vulnerability, and the vulnerability is that they're afraid of magic? Like magic is scary to them. And that magic could either that magic either triggers them into being aggressive or it scares them. Either way.
We've got some great stuff in chat too. Like Frankly Delicious says they may have electric eels as pets that can paralyze one round. Dyson Cape says have more hit points as the leader. Ryan Winter says, what if the otter folk are impacting the local fishing town with their giant crab killing? That would give them more reason to defend themselves because they've been recently harassed by the villagers who are upset that all their crabs go missing. Maybe some sort of druid magic, somebody said. Ooh, maybe druid magic? Like the
but if they have druid magic, then why would they be afraid of magic?
Well, it might not necessarily be they're afraid of like a particular type of magic, like fire, or they're
I see. Like evocation
magics.
Is specifically okay. So fear of evocation, that's very specific.
Right.
Okay, fear of evocation magic. I like the idea of them having some druidic-like powers, but I think only one of them has the druid powers.
The leader.
Yeah. Okay. So leader.
Oh no, Dyson Capes was clarifying. He says they fear druidic magic.
Oh, that's interesting.
That is interesting.
Because they kill crabs, they're worried that the druids are going to come beat them up because they've been killing too many crabs.
I guess I don't know. Maybe just. That would seem to me that magic in general would be fearful, not just druidic magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because magic is bending nature.
Right.
Or reality.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, they fear druid magic. Interesting.
Or maybe they've had a run-in. Dyson Capes, I think, is trying to say maybe they had a run-in with a druid that kind of taught.
That gives them a little bit more history. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially
if don't druids have access to some evocation spells as well? Like they have fire spells, right?
They have fire spells. Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Okay. So I'm just going to put
there's an entire druid that is all fire, right? The circle, that circle.
Yeah, the flame.
Wildfire.
Yeah. So I'm going to put
circle of the flame.
They had a run in with. Let's just make it fire. That's fine.
I think fire is good.
So instead of it being druid, instead of it being evocation, we're just going to say fire magic. Not natural fire.
No.
Fire magic specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That works well.
And it ties well because they're in a cove, right? They're in water. And they love water.
Maybe they had a run-in with a druid that didn't like them killing all the crabs, and that druid used a fire spell to,
Here's a question. Do they
scare
get vulnerability?
That is their vulnerability.
So they're vulnerable to fire.
No. They're afraid of it.
Okay, so it just causes it instills fear. The use of fire magic instills fear. Got it.
Yeah, and it could either trigger, like I said, it could either trigger them. This is all story.
Yeah.
But it could either trigger them to attack, or it could trigger them to run away, depending on their save or however how it's presented, that kind of thing. Okay. So we're not giving them any druid powers, right?
Yeah,
if they had druid powers, then why would they be afraid of it?
Yeah, and a CR3, we're trying to keep powers to a minimum because otherwise you're going to start to.
So what can they do as attack?
Well, we've already indicated that they make weapons and armor out of claws and stuff. Okay. So I think somebody earlier said maybe a spear with a big crab claw at the end of it.
Right.
I think that's
cool. We'll say crab spear.
Mm-hmm.
What do we want to give that for damage?
So the average damage per round of a CR3 creature should be 21 to 26 damage per round.
Right, but there's 5 of them, so we need to divide that?
That's where it gets a little strange because technically we need to do a little bit less damage in general because we have an armor class that's higher than a CR3 typically is,
right?
Or drop the hit points. We've done that a little bit with the hit points, I think, because they all have 25 hit points.
Right.
So I think the damage should be probably around, we'll say 2 levels down, so 9 to 14 per hit.
I like that. What I'm thinking we could do is the spear only does spear damage, but piercing. They have sneak attack.
That would give us a 9 to 14 for sure.
That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So spears do D6 in one hand, D8 if there's if they're two-handed. Yeah. Okay. So and maybe do we give them a strength bonus?
No, I don't think they're very strong.
So just D6.
D6 and then the
D6,
sneak attack.
D8.
So the sneak attack we could make a lower, since it wasn't necessarily a trained sneak attack and they just learned it through evolutionary means, you have the normal sneak attack if you wanted. So
instead of doing 2d6, it does 1d6. Okay, I dig that.
I like the
idea that they
to damage.
No,
with a spear because I think is this can you not use?
It's not finesse.
It's not.
No.
Oh, okay.
We're also letting them do sneak attack with a weapon that's not finesse.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
I mean, if we want to, we can change it somehow.
It's versatile. Oh, which is 2 hands. Versatile. Not finesse.
That's the D6 versus the D8.
Yeah.
So I like the idea that the only way they get sneak attack is if there's 2 of them or more attacking the same target, and that's how they kill the crabs. They've learned, like I see a bunch of people saying pack tactics. They've learned that the easiest way to down this big crab is if they all hit the same person at the same time. And the reason why I like that is because they're smart enough to know that, which makes them nasty in combat, because when they fight, they're all going to attack the same player character instead of divvying up their attacks to a bunch of different people.
So should we introduce an alternative to pack tactics, which is similar pack tactics, which is we could say gang up, maybe like a gang up on someone where if
but I don't think they need advantage. I don't think they need advantage. I'm saying they just get their sneak attack.
Oh, okay. So no,
you see what I'm saying?
Oh, I was trying to solve the problem of sneak attack by giving them advantage, right? Like you give them advantage, now they get sneak attack.
But if they have advantage and sneak attack, we're talking like player character killers real fast, right?
Yep. I mean, it's 2d6, so the lowest, with the 2d6, the amount of damage you're going to get, even if they all sneak attack, is 10d6 on one person.
Yeah.
So that's 6 to 60. No, 6 to 60.
That's a lot.
And you're going to fall in around your average damage in that attack for 2d6 is going to be what, 3.5, 7? So 2d6 average damage is 7 times 5 is 35.
So you're saying that if all 5 of them hit, they're going to do around 35 damage?
Average.
Right. That's...
Yeah. Oh no. I'm just. Yeah. I'm doing it outside. I'm doing it out loud so that the people who are watching this understand why we're making those decisions. Yeah. Yeah. So then maybe. Yeah. Okay. I get you. But then
I don't feel like they need advantage.
Okay.
I feel like we can give them a bonus to hit and skip the advantage because we haven't got into their bonus to hit yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
are they proficient with crab attacks? Are they proficient?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean they make these weapons. Why would they make these weapons and not just use their own?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's also, you could introduce that they just have claws as well. Right.
Oh no, I like the crab stuff. I think that's fun.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm not saying change it. I'm just saying also give them a claw attack.
Yeah. Oh, you mean in case they lose their spear, they can still claw?
Right.
Yeah, that's fine. We can give them a claw attack. That's a D4.
Yeah. Right.
But maybe it's a D4 because they are have a higher dex. Maybe it's a D4 plus 1 or a D4 plus 2.
Or whatever their dex modifier ends up being.
Well, if it's plus 2, then they're doing a D4 plus 2, which is actually better than using the spears.
Well, unless you're sneak attacking.
So they only get sneak attacks with weapons, not with their claws. Okay.
Because that's how they evolved, right? They evolved by using the spears to
Yeah, okay. I get it. Okay. So we could give them advantage if they're in the water though. Mm-hmm. That's fun. Especially if a player character actually gets in the water, yeah.
So they might run into the cove and there's like 2 or 3 of them and they're 2 hiding in the water just because they were chilling out. And then as people came in, they're like, oh, we better hold still. They won't see us.
Okay, so if in water, advantage on the attack and sneak attack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, because they have advantage. They can sneak attack on land, but only if there's 2 or more.
We'll make it 3 or more. Make it harder for them to get a sneak attack.
Okay. 3 or more.
Right. Because there's 5 of them. 2 or more of them is going to be really easy.
I mean, I'm going to have them all attack. If it's me running this combat, I'm going to have them all attack the same player character.
Okay.
100%.
Right. But even then, if you get if 2 or more, then you're still doing 35 average, is what I'm saying. Even if you don't give them advantage, they're still doing 35 average.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Cool.
I like the idea of the only way that they're really going to snap, though, is if the player characters pick a fight or the player characters do some kind of fire spell. And then they're like, oh, we're killing that guy. We're
first going to roll which ones get afraid and which ones get angry. And then we're killing that guy with the fire.
Yeah. Everybody attack the fire guy. Okay.
Dare you?
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Viking Rose says make sure the tidal conditions are based on when the party goes in to determine water conditions. Absolutely.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. Love it. Otters crack muscles with their teeth, so perhaps a nice bite attack. Well, they already have claws.
We could change the claw to bite if we wanted.
Yeah. That's fine.
That's cool. I like that.
Okay.
Thank you, Frankly Delicious.
Okay, so we have their hit points, we have their armor class, we have their size, we have their attack, we have their bite, we have their vulnerability, which is fun. We kind of have their general story. We know that their swim speed is the same as their move. I'm assuming 30 feet for both, right?
Yeah.
They have a sneak attack. They have natural camo when in water.
Hit points. How many hit points do they have? We said 25.
25.
Cool.
Yeah.
Languages?
Oh, yeah. They have to. Yeah, for sure.
Common at least, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking they speak like a very broken form of common.
Great.
Yeah. Because I think that they're like average to low intelligence. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say broken common. Maybe they have their own language as well, but I don't see the player characters being able to speak that unless they have comprehend languages or some kind of spell that allows them to do that. Okay, great.
But we could introduce that where they have a language that's their own. And
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So
Plus, that gives us opportunity to role play where we're having a conversation without knowing what Gigi is saying.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
And that'll be fun for people to watch, I'm sure.
Yeah. So
one of them gets into an argument.
Yeah. So something that to kind of cap this off, because we talked about it so much in the first part of this show, we already have the vulnerability. I don't really think we need to give them a bonus action or a passive ability or anything like that. What I would like to do though, and we already have some lore going around them as well, like if the player characters figure out that they're scared of fire or they hate fire, that's kind of their lore. What I would like to decide is if they either get along really well with the otter people or if they kill all of the otter people, what is the point? What's the treasure? What's the thing that they have?
Well, that's they stole stuff from the village, nearby, right?
Yes.
We talked about that.
Yes.
So that's a real.
But what is that? And can we have them use that in a worst case scenario setting? Like, remember when I was talking about the levers? This is way too easy or this is way too hard. I feel like the item that they stole or items that they stole can be part of that lever system. Does that make sense? Like if they cast a spell that, stuns all the otters or makes them all scared on the first round, and then it's super easy for them, I think that item could be they go over to this box and pull out the whatever, and they use that against the player characters, and that's your Hail Mary. That's your this is too easy trigger.
Pearl of Power.
No. No, they're just making the allusion to the clam situation.
Pearl of Power with one spell in it.
Mm-hmm.
A fireball, in fact.
Ooh, mirror. I like the mirror idea.
Yeah,
frankly, delicious.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Mirror. So they stole a mirror. Maybe it's magical. What would the mirror? I love that idea. Thank you. So the item is a mirror. And there can be other things too. Like maybe they have some coins, maybe they have some gems, pearls, whatever that they can find that's just money. But I'm talking about their Hail Mary. Player characters are whooping our butts. This is the mirror that they have that they know does something, but they don't totally understand, but they're going to use it on the player characters. So what does that mirror do?
What if it has a spell per day? And I have an idea of a spell. I have an idea of a spell per day. What if it's not hypnotic pattern? Right? Hypnotic pattern? Or am I thinking, is that too high of a spell?
I think that's third.
That's third level. I'm thinking the color one. The one
color spray.
Color spray.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's first level.
It is first level, but maybe it's first level.
It could be casted higher. Yeah, it could be casted like second or third.
Okay. So it's a mirror that they stole from like an enchanter, maybe?
Maybe, yeah.
I'm trying to give
merchant,
it some backstory.
Or a local merchant. A merchant nearby.
A merchant that has it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Or was traveling down the road and they happened to see him and with that thing they stole.
Who do you think would be good for this mirror that the otter people stole? It sends them to the salvage manders.
Everybody wants these otters to meet the salvage manders. Everybody.
I feel like the otters would probably kill the salvage manders because they seem a little bit more ruthless than the salvage
Also,
manders.
I'm pretty sure otters eat that type of creature.
Oh, yeah. An enchanter from the local fishing town. Okay, thank you, Ryan Winters. We'll go with enchanter. Okay, so enchanter, fisherman, maybe. It's a fisherman that's an enchanter. That's different. Mm-hmm. So color spray. What is color spray? Can you look color spray up for me, Ron?
A dazzling array of flashing colored lights springs from your hand. Roll 6d10. The total is how many hit points of creatures this spell can affect. Creatures in a 15-foot cone originating from you are affected in an ascending order in their current total hit points. You ignore unconscious creatures or creatures that can't see. Starting with a creature that has the lowest current hit points, each creature affected by the spell is blinded until the end of your next turn. Then you subtract that creature's hit points from the total before moving on to the creature with the lowest hit points. The next
Okay,
lowest.
so right now it's 60-10, which is an average of 30-ish.
You add additional 2d10 for each slot above level 1.
So I would like, because this is our Hail Mary, I would like their... Do they get a save? Or is it just based off hit points?
No, it's based off hit points, so no save.
Ooh.
It's like sleep, but
That's
blinding
interesting.
instead of sleep.
That's almost nastier.
I mean, blinding is temporary. It's only until the end of your next turn, where sleep would put them until they could get hit. So, I think Color Spray is a better one here because it's a temporary effect. But
right, and blind also doesn't take them out of combat.
Correct.
It just slows them.
Makes it harder for them to hit. Yeah.
Do they have shrubbery? There's lots of Monty Python in chat right now, which I respect. So I would say at least 2 tiers higher, right? Because we want them to be a big, nasty Hail Mary. So it's instead of 60-10, it's 10d10.
I have
hit points.
I did you take your Tim the Enchanter mini that I gave you?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Do you have it
Of
nearby?
course. No, I'd have to dig for it. No, I just have so many boxes of minis that I don't know where it is.
I got you.
I think it would be hilarious if the enchanter that they took the mirror from, like Chad is saying, is kind of a crazy Tim the Enchanter kind of character.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I'm going to put that down as a possible maybe. So that if they decide to take the mirror and return it to him, they find out that he's mad, like he's just insane, out of his mind. That's fun. Because who puts color spray into a mirror? Who does that? Right?
He does, so he doesn't have to look at himself.
Yeah. What do I look like? Oh!
And he has to cast it at a high enough level so it makes sure to impact him.
Yeah. I love it.
Infinity Hamster says Ron does. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe he made that intentionally, like
it's a gag gift.
Someone in the fishing village that he's like, they are so self-obsessed.
They're so vain.
Give them this mirror.
Here, I got you a new mirror. Happy birthday.
Yeah. And then the otter people stole
So he's mad and petty.
Yeah. That's a whole side quest.
That's a whole side quest called The Mad and Petty Fisherman.
Yeah. I think this is great.
I do too. I think it's awesome. This is so good.
And we can easily tweak this up or down depending on how nasty the player characters are by the time they get here.
You're so vain. You probably don't think this mirror's about you. Don't you? Don't you?
And this is when we've lost Ron. Okay. So something that I would also add in there treasure-wise, just for everyone doing this at home, is I would probably have them have some money too, so that if they end up wanting to like barter with the otter people, because again, this doesn't have to be a fight. Doesn't have to be a fight. Doesn't need to go into combat. They just have these things. Maybe they'd be willing to trade the mirror for Mirror of Vanity. I love that. Dice and Capes. I'm going to write that down. Maybe it's not a fight. So maybe it's good to have these items, like the crab stuff, the coinage, some gems, and the mirror as things that they could trade with the player characters. And it's an RP moment, especially if you have player characters in your group that are people persons that have high, like the lilies of the world, high persuasions and what have you. Give those people a chance to use those abilities so they're not just like when they're in town negotiating with merchants for goods or something along those lines. It gives you a chance to, now people are posting stats about the North American river otters.
That was
me. Oh, you did that. Okay, great. I love it.
Just to show what they eat and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And worst case scenario, we can always just add more otter people or subtract otter people to make it nastier.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
Yeah.
If they get there, they're not 3rd level, they're 4th level when they get this one. We can add more otter people. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Maybe also, the leader otter has an ability where they can call into the cave and more otter people come out to help
we
fight.
could do where otter people ride some of these giant crabs into battle.
Oh, and the crabs fight too. Dude.
That's where my head goes. I want to see otters ride crab mounts into battle. Let's do this.
That gets pretty epic. That's like, but that's starting to get to the point where it's like they're on the epic quest to deal with the otter people.
Which could very well be what happens when we get there. You never know, right? Like, that's the beauty of one of the cool things I like about monster creation is it sometimes gives you really good ideas for quests in general, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
100%. I feel like in the fire, I like the fear of fire a lot.
I like
too.
Infinity Hamster. I feel like Infinity Hamster is a power gaming DM. Because it was give the mirror time travel abilities. Let's have the, the otter people can die and resurrect the next day. Like, very interesting if that is where you want to take your stories. Very interesting. I could find certainly many worlds in which those would be very cool otter people. Time traveling, resurrecting otter people.
Yeah. Oh, because they're a little roguish, we could also do a bonus action dash. Because then they can position themselves on the battlefield and they can get where they need to go.
So they're like half rogue. They get some abilities of rogues. I love that.
I'm gonna do bonus action dash as a possible upgrade.
Yes, Will Meister. When the crabs are running, they clack their claws together to make like the sound. That's
the coconuts.
They train them to do that.
Yeah. I feel like we're in a good place. I don't feel like we need to add anything else to that.
And we've almost done
legendary.
An additional hour.
Yeah. The layer is interesting to me, though. If we had more time, I would want to do some layer actions because it's such a specific setting. But when we do another one of these cooldowns, what I think the next cooldown can be, if it's you and me, Ron, doing this kind of world building stuff, is we will talk about legendary resistances, legendary actions, and layer actions, and then we can design a layer.
I mean, some layer stuff I can already think about is like at because layer actions happened at initiative 20. So you could have things where like the cave fills with more water, so all of a sudden they can just lay down in the water and hold still, and now they disappear.
Or another random giant crab enters the fray, and you don't know if that crab is going to fight player characters or fight otters or.
And if we had a druid who has like, why is the crab here? Has a conversation with the crab. They killed my family. I'm here for revenge.
Yeah. And the crab pulls out a little knife. Tries to.
Let's do this.
Have you seen that? There's a cute video where there's a crab that's got like a little knife for some reason in its claw, and it just starts waving it around. All right. Well, we've totally digressed.
We did.
And we went way over, but this was a ton of fun. Like I legitimately really enjoyed this. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Quick little plug for Wednesday. We're doing Fortune Fate again. Gabe is going to be DMing. I think he's going to try to pick up where I left off, which ought to be interesting because the god was brought back. A giant, anyways, a storm giant. But it's going to be Jalen is going to be with us again, which is awesome. Ron, Jessica, and myself. So tune in Wednesday for that. We have big announcements coming, possibly even on Wednesday. If not, by the end of the week, we'll have those for you as well. If you haven't joined our Discord, it's awesome. And we post a lot of things there first. Usually Patreon, usually Patreon first, and then the Discord, and then our social media. So if you want to get those tidbits before anybody else, join the Discord. And if you haven't joined our Patreon, and you can, please do so. I've been Jared Kajak.
I, as always, am Ron Ogden.
This has been the Dungeon Run Cooldown, and we are going to be doing this as much as we possibly can leading up to the launch of season 2, which is in June, which Ron and I are both very excited for. We have a map that JP is almost done with that we're going to be able to spoil, which is awesome.
Excited.
We have artwork being done by our beautiful, amazing artists. JD Illustrates is going to be doing the player character art for all of the new PCs. So we're going to be releasing that as well. Ron, is there anything else that I'm forgetting? Is there any merch or something?
We have the DTP shirt. We have the
nice.
Hero of Bingled Names shirt up on the site, so you guys make sure to check our merch store. More stuff coming as we continue into season 2. Thank you to all of our patrons. Again, without you, we would not be able to do this show or any of our shows, so thank you very much. And those of you who have spent your time, sent us balloons, subscribed, all of that, thank you so much as well for your support. And I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. This is the longest cooldown we've ever done.
It is. It is the longest cooldown. It's a half Arcane Artistry is what it was. It was half an Arcane Artistry. We will be rating Captain Robert. So you guys stick around. Make sure to check them out. They're great little stream there. Do a lot of D&D. You know, I'm gonna leave it up to chat. Chat, do you want to see more D&D, or do you want to see Xander play some Masquerade Swan Song, which I've recently gotten into as well? I'll let you guys decide, and then we'll go from there. But thank you, everybody, and we will see you next time. And remember, humankind, be both.
Mwah.